All right, I'm joined today by Perry Carpenter, and Perry and I go back a few years. He worked with me at uh, Gartner, and he has a vast background in information security as well. And Perry today is the Chief Strategy Officer at KnowBe4. Welcome, Perry.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is gonna be
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. So when I think about phishing and people talk to me about phishing, the first name that comes to mind for me is Perry Carpenter. So
Well, that's good to know.
yeah. So I want to talk today a little bit about, as a security leader, and, I've talked with a lot of CISOs and we wrestle with security awareness. And um, oftentimes I don't think we do it really well. And so maybe
Mhm.
just, from your perspective as somebody with industry background and now at Know Before, just a little bit about why awareness is really one of the most critical things a CISO should make sure they do right.
Yeah, actually, there's a couple things that come to mind for me with that, and I may have even said this to you when I was at Gartner and we were talking. I would always say awareness is the face and the voice of the CISO to the rest of the organization. So if you're working with like a 20,000 person organization, you're probably only really making contact and being physically in front of maybe 200 people in a year, maybe less than that now that we're all virtual.
Yeah.
Um, and so you can really only have relationships with a very small fragment of the organization. And so everything that all those other 19,900 or 19,800 people in the organization see is the material that you put in front of them. And because of that, it has to be relevant to them. It has to match the corporate culture, not pull against it. And it has to be really as good or better than anything that they interact with. Otherwise, you're irrelevant and you're somebody that can't be trusted. And so when it's your face and it's your brand, it has to be great and it has to be relevant and it has to be impactful and you have to be respectful of people's time.
Yeah, and I think it took me about 2 years to figure out that I couldn't just, you know, pull everybody into the list and send them and assign them send them a link, assign them some training and call it good. And it
Right.
led to, I tried to work hard at creating customized bulletins that kind of had, you know, a voice to them and make it applicable to them. So the relevance part, I absolutely spot on, with my experience. And so, for example, if you're going to send out phishing tips, don't just say be aware of phishing. Give them three
Right.
tips. You know, make it something they can use not only
Yeah.
when they're at work but when they're at home. Um, so it seems this would be a good investment if we're talking about security awareness. People are very interested in it because they see the headlines, they know about the hacks. Um, I guess you know let's talk why what are some tips or things you would think of that would make that message kind of more effective?
Okay. Let me zoom back a little bit because about 2 years ago, I think I released a book called Transformational Security Awareness. And there was this mantra that I had almost all the way through it. And it was built on the idea of the fact that we grapple with, when we think about awareness and failures traditionally with awareness, it's because programs haven't really solved for this thing that I call the knowledge intention behavior gap, which is we know things, but we may not actually intend to act on that knowledge.
Right.
And even if we intend to act on that, we may fail in the moment, which is why New Year's resolutions fail, where we say, I want to lose weight, I want to get in shape, I want to spend more time with my family, I want to save more money, I want to do all those things. But in the moment, even though we know the benefit of that and we actually intend to do it, we just don't. We make trade offs. We make very in the moment, knee jerk decisions. So when it comes down to awareness leaders, there's three things, three realities that are the mantra that I think that they need to know. One is just because I'm aware doesn't mean that I care. Two is if we try to work against human nature, we will fail every time. And I would always say at Gartner, if there's a gap between your policy reality or your policy expectations and your behavioral reality, it's because the policy isn't expecting the people to act like humans. It's expecting kind of an automatic response to words, and people
Right.
don't work that way. And then the third one is what our employees do is way more important than what they know. And the clearest way that I can support that is what somebody has known has never stopped a breach. It's the in the moment action that stops a breach. And I can know all the right things in the world and still allow a breach to happen. Or I may reflexively do the right thing absent of the knowledge and still stop the breach from happening. So we have to really orient our programs around those things. Is that knowing isn't caring. We're dealing with human nature, and behavior is really important. And then, so fundamentally, that means that we have to find ways to really build guidelines that push people in the right directions using behavior science and things like nudge theory and so on. And when we're dealing with content-based, message-based awareness or information-based awareness, we have to find ways to root that knowledge in a very primal way within somebody's mind, so it becomes an instinctual type of thing where there's a lot of emotion and grit to that. And that's not relying on fear, by the way. That is dealing with the rawness of what it is to be human.
So if we're gonna, sounds a bit like building, muscle memory. People say building,
Yeah,
quick muscle reflex and things like that. And so, I guess what are the fundamentals about that? So let's just talk a little bit about phishing, for example.
yeah,
So early on when we started doing regular phishing assessments, the first reaction is you're trying to trick me, you're trying to punish me. That's not fair. You're
mhm,
the saying that it was tricky, but so I think that the three things I always tried to endeavor to do were, to get people to think about what's coming through, the psychology of it. Just three things,
yeah,
is it making me angry? Is it making me alarmed? And telling them to hit the pause button and think about that. Just take one step back, take a breath.
mhm,
So maybe let's talk a little bit about that psychology. What are the fundamental psychologies around educating people to get them to? You're right that there's the no. You can
yeah.
know a lot of things and not be able to do it in the moment because you discard all of that knowledge.
Mhm. Yeah, there was one thing you alluded to that I want to tease out and make sure that everybody hears is that this is muscle memory that people are building. So another pithy comment that I say all the time is that at all times you're either building strength or you're allowing atrophy. And so for organizations that are saying, hey, we'll do a phishing test once a year or once a quarter, you're really not doing that. You're just feeling how out of shape you are. If you only go to the gym once a year
Yeah.
and then you do a big training session, you walk away only knowing how pathetic you are. You're in a lot of pain, you feel bad, and it hurts for several weeks afterwards. But if you constantly go, then you build muscle memory, you start to build strength, and you're actually engaging in training. And that means that frequency when it comes to this, anytime you're building motor memory or muscle memory, is really critical to that. So you have to have frequency so that people are always on their toes wondering what's about to hit their inbox. And then you do really have to get them to the point where they're thinking, all right, emotionally, am I being tripped in some way?
Right.
Um, and from a psychological standpoint, I typically default to Daniel Kahneman's way of talking about system one and system two thinking, where system one is very fast, it's emotion driven, it's all about taking shortcuts, and it's prone to error. Now, the problem with system one is, though, that it governs about 95% of what we do. System two is much slower and it's methodical and it's typically very correct and good in what it does, but it takes effort and our mind doesn't like it. So we have to intentionally step into system two. And even when we're there, if we're there for a prolonged time, our mind is saying, go back to system one, find a shortcut here. So the only way to actually deal with things like phishing effectively is either get it to where somebody can naturally have a trigger point where they say, now I need to enter system two, and to stay there long enough to do all the things that we know that you have to do to look at it, or to make what used to be system two become a system one process, which means that you built all the right neural pathways and everything else to where this is now an automatic shortcut behavior and it's instinctual and that muscle memory is there.